we're just going to wait a couple of minutes so that all of our panelists can join us up front here. But in the meantime, just a few kind of house rules. If you guys feel at any point that you guys want to go and grab some drinks and snacks in the back, then feel free to do that. For those of you who don't know, toilets are to that side of the hall and through the halls that way. I think we're almost about complete. Should I start? Is Daniel?
What?
Is Daniel joining us?
Yeah, I think he will be leaving.
Okay, so we have one of our panelists joining. Welcome. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Chang from the Department of European Planning Cultures at the Technical University of Dortmund. And I'm really happy to be able to welcome everybody tonight to our event, which is an event that tries to create an opportunity for more discussion with some guests from our local initiatives as well as some international and national initiatives to look at temporary urbanism as well as how it intersects with some of the philosophies of post-growth. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a PhD researcher who has been focusing on temporary urbanism for the past few years, since 2015 at least. And I've also been lecturing as well as pursuing my PhD. And during the course of my lectureships, I've had the opportunity to be able to talk as well as debate and explore with students in different formats, from projects to seminars, what temporary urbanism, temporary uses look like. And so tonight is a very opportune moment for the students to be able to not only use this chance to learn a little bit and to also direct some of their own assignments and final submissions from what we have here, but also hear about some of the discussions from real experts and practitioners in the field. I also have a very lovely colleague here, Lamker, who will be co-moderating. I'll let you say a few words about yourself.
Yeah, so some short comments about myself. Lamker, my name was mentioned. I'm happy to welcome all our regional, national, international guests. There are some of the international guests here, so welcome to all of you. I'm working at Dortmund University as well as postdoctoral research associate in the Department of Spatial Planning and Planning Theory. And I'm more in the second part of today's title on post-growth, I guess, because I started working on defining, establishing post-growth planning as a critical approach to organize campus spaces beyond growth. Here, basically starting in the German planning discussion a few years ago. If you like to look, there's a bit of that on the Facebook page that you can reach on postgrowthplanning.com. It's mostly German so far, but we'll work on that, and I'm happy that we collect some more ideas here today. Am I too loud? No? Okay, just a different introduction up front. Okay, that should be enough about introduction from me, and I see temporary use as kind of core of this agenda of working beyond growth in our minds, our institutions, and to work more creatively, more experimental, and to learn from failures that we might do and that occur. And thereby, I think we touch upon many basic issues of planning, from land ownership, from decision making, and that will guide us to the next minutes, hours, and even more, hopefully, the next days in all of us.
Thanks, Sam. Just a few words before we officially start. So I just wanted to acknowledge the students who are here today and help set up. If you guys could just raise your hands very quickly. So if anybody has any questions during the event or after the event to talk to the students about some of the learnings that they're doing here, feel free to approach them. Just wanted to acknowledge that their work is also a key part of this. And also that learning is a huge and very important component to temporary uses and temporary urbanism. It's more of the angle that I take on this. So hopefully with different types of perspectives that Sam as well as myself bring in to provide a platform for all of our speakers to speak to this event will be fruitful for everyone here today. So we have a few different sections for this program tonight. Everybody hopefully has a copy of the program. We're going to be bouncing a little bit back and forth, but I just wanted to open the opportunity up to you guys. If there's any point in time that you guys might have questions, then please hold it until after the section. So we'll have two sections after the panelists introduce themselves. The first being looking at the interventions themselves, and then the second one more looking at interests and management of interests. But we will try to capture as many of the questions that we can, or create more opportunities for discussion, so it's not just a kind of, well, two-directional discussion between the two of us, or not the two of us, the two kind of parties up front. Yeah, so without further ado then, I think we can go through and introduce the panelists. And we don't really have any specific order except that some of the slides have been put on here in specific order. So if Daniel doesn't mind changing to the next slides, then we'll start with the first panelist. Oh wait, this is actually your slide. Sorry about that. This one.
Yeah, that was just one statement that I wanted to put into the discussion, that we need to find new ways to produce growth-independent spaces collectively in common but differentiated responsibilities and in versatile roles. That basically means finding ways how we overcome our barriers in thinking, our own barriers in thinking, and to learn from all your actions, and maybe some more actions around here, and more ideas. So that enrich that the debate that's already begun, that Robin has been working on for years in temporary use, that I have been working on for years in post-growth ideas, and there's lots of intersections that we will enrich, that this will continue forever for the next years and maybe decades. So that's, I guess, enough as introduction. And now the next slide is here, Dortmund 2014.
I'm Thomas. I'm a student at the Faculty of Urban Planning, Spatial Planning in Dortmund. And we started, we can call it an initiative, I don't know yet. That's called Dortmund 2014. It started in a master design that we did with, I think, let's say 20, 30 students. And now we are a group of 10, 20 people changing all the time, working in this, working from this design approach. And we are now starting an initiative to talk about urban design, to talk about temporary urbanism. And we are building installations like chairs and installations to show photos and everything. And this is basically our design approach. It's about public space mostly. How we see public space in Dortmund in 2014. The design was more than this, but this is our approach now, how to deal with public space in this temporary style. Maybe the next slide you can see some more images, how we imagine Dortmund streets in a few years, kids playing in the streets, less cars, less space used by parking cars. This is another slide about a picture of how we envision a block or how we live in the city in the future. And then the next slide, some ideas photos from temporary uses in Dortmund, how you can use the street to show photos and everything. And this is basically our design approach. It's about public space mostly. How we see public space in Dortmund in 2014. The design was more than this, but this is our approach now, how to deal with public space in this temporary style. Where we discussed this and discussed what to do in which locations, where to start, how to transform in our temporary way the city a little bit for just a day and talk about urban space and urban planning. Right. This was us last week, walking through the city and just sitting down and having a good time. And right now it's mostly ourselves discussing those topics, and hopefully when we actually start our installations and have them there for an entire day, or for the Hafenspaziergang, for example, we want to go there and to talk about urban planning with the people of Dortmund, basically. We already started a political discussion in the Ausschuss of the city, in the council, city council, and also at university. But now we want to go out and continue this.
Great, thanks, Thomas. Yeah, so as you can see, we have some local examples of basically explorations of what temporary uses or temporary urbanism looks like. A lot of it is very much exploratory, experimental, and involves a process of learning that takes place at the individual, but also at the group level. So we're going to move out of the local context and go on to our next panelists. This will be Set, or also Ab from them. And yeah, I'm in the middle of them.
Yes. So I'm on the stage, my colleague. We are from Bremen, as Robin mentioned, and have a small office there, which is maybe next slide. Yeah, that's us. And that just it is. Of course, it's I studied spatial planning here in Dortmund, and then I studied in Bremen. And well, we found our office 2006 more or less by some lucky chance, and we were always handling with the existing urban space. Maybe the next slide would be fine, because what we are doing is really caring about the existing structures, the buildings, the places. Spaces and think about how we can get it back into use or even in a more intensive use. So like this thing, what I mentioned is like really finding the real methods for the different cases which fit with them, and maybe this is the best way to get some alive into that. So maybe we have the next slide. I can see something about that. Oh, well, that was looking very different. So one thing is the project that which is about temporary use agency. We are doing since 2009, and well, this is originally been founded for 3 years by the national government, and because it went so successful, it has been prolonged from 2012 to 2020 right now, and that's really like in the basic it's about really caring about temporary uses. Which is quite special, is that we are not only like working like consultants who make like maybe connections between owners and users which are interested in a place, but as well try to stimulate and initiate a project for ourselves. So well, we're kind of exhausted because this last weekend we had the finish of one of our projects and like had Saturday party, and yesterday we had coffee and cake. And today we started moving out and went here. So that's about the temporary use agency. So that's really, I mean, we will mention this later in the discussion. One of the basic things, that also the most important things, is that we are like keeping the connection between the different stakeholders. So on the one hand, these users, on the other hand, the administration, the owners. So you need somebody who's really making all those work and connections between the people. But I was just mentioning some other things we were doing. This is, for example, walks, spaziergänge is something which was mentioned, a very good method to keep people with you and show them parts of the cities that they are maybe not used to walk or to watch or even to attend. And the first walk we did was in Nieder under the city highway. So a place you would not do a walk for yourself, but if you go there with a group, you really get a good perspective of the city and on which, for example, which kind of transport is dominating and which one is maybe having the shitty places there. Well, that's kind of our projects. So that's, for example, concerning about temporary use. We do not make only contracts, but we rent places ourselves, because it's a quite difficult thing to find certain people which, from start on, are a group which will have together a contract with the owners. So it's much easier if we do that and then make subcontracts to the people who will use the place. And actually, we are not only doing temporary uses, but as well, right, like reports about spaces, for example, for creative industries, or we just made a concept for a cultural creative center in Nuremberg. So it's all, what the basic thing is connected to existing spaces, and I think this is the most important thing, to find solutions for those buildings and spaces which already exist. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much. It's perfect. You all keep so good in time, and will allow us for enough discussion later. So thank you, and we'll move on to the next of our panelists. Actually, we'll move much closer back to Dortmund, to the Urbanism e.V., to Jan Bunze. Their office is quite close by, to get some of your impressions.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, by the way. It's nice to be here in our very close location. My name is Jan from the Urbanism. We started off as a student initiative back in 2010, where we considered the ways the Ruhr 2010 cultural capital of Europe, the ways they treated subculture in Dortmund wasn't really nice and inviting. So back then there were some political movements in Dortmund. There was the Right to the City movement. There were different subcultures that wanted to have spaces for creativity. And in the wake of this, these things, we formed the association Urbanism. And our goal was from the very beginning to involve people from the streets that live in the areas within the city planning activities, to give them a voice, to give them places for expressing themselves. So one of our first projects was to design those energy boxes that you find in the streets, which is not a new thing actually. A lot of people do it in a lot of cities worldwide, but we wanted to have it not only as an intervention that is done at night or something that is done by kindergartens, but to give it some artistic quality at one hand, and second hand, we also wanted to make it a little event in the streets to actually make them clean and design them. From this perspective, a lot of our projects have developed. So we always wanted to involve people, we always wanted to do things that are public, and we always wanted to change the whole by doing small things. So by now, this is almost 10 years ago, we did a lot of projects that were sometimes small, sometimes larger. A lot of events that we did in the streets. We did a lot of youth work. We invited elderly to come to us and work with us, talk with us, and do things. We're also involved in several research projects by now, where we act as a translator for people in the streets and that live there. Like I said, and not only do the research on the paper to create paper tigers, we don't like that. So yeah, one of the projects that I'm dealing with is urban manufacturing. That's something that has come as a buzzword by now, to actually make people manufacture goods back in the city again. That is one of the projects that's really exciting. Another thing is to create something in here, actually, in this room, in this space. Which is going on for several months now, but will be going on for several years. So you are happily invited to take part in this development. We can talk about that later maybe. And we're still doing those art projects, and we're doing urban games, and another large field of ours is urban gardening and farming, where we've been developing several urban gardens, and now also try to bring that to another level by with more technology and more knowledge about economic dimensions, to actually make it possible to feasibly produce food in the city. So a lot of things, a lot of actions, where a lot of people, so 40 members, by now over 40 members I think, and about 15 of those are active members that actually make the projects happen and meet regularly in a very flat hierarchy, and yeah, a lot of do together. One thing I did mention is a workshop down here where we do things with wood. So yeah, it has always been the connection of getting physical with the right things that are in your mind and in your head, and work on both sides at the same time. So far.
Thanks for that, Jan. Yeah, so as everybody can probably tell from now, temporary urbanism is represented by a broad range of activities and a broad range of formats too. Everything from student research projects that have melded into policy, to more regional soft policy, to community development initiatives and more short-term projects that do with urban gardening as well as redesign of streets. We're going to get a little bit more exotic here and jump somewhere international. And yeah, our last panelist is McDonald.
Good evening. So first of all, thank you, Robin, thank you, Christian, and thank you to all the students of the faculty of European Planning Cultures of the Faculty of Spatial Planning at Technical University of Dortmund for the invitation and for organizing this panel discussion on temporary urbanism. This is my first time in Dortmund, so I'm really happy to be here and share my expertise on the topic of temporary urbanism. Just a little bit about myself. I was trained as an architect at the Polytechnic of Milan in Italy, and I obtained my PhD in urban planning at the University of Rome. Now, currently, I'm a postdoc in urban studies at the Gran Sasso Science Institute of L'Aquila, Italy. And beside my Italian academic career, I had the chance to conduct research abroad, especially in Trondheim in Norway, at Columbia University in New York, and Berkeley University in San Francisco. So today I'm here as an academic and not a practitioner, but I think it's interesting to be here and share even the theoretical approach to the topic of temporary urbanism. So my very first approach to this concept of temporariness in theory and practice was during my master's degree for two different convergent events. First of all, my visit to the American pavilion at the 2012 Venice Architecture Biennale, titled Design Action for the Common Good, where that showed me how spontaneous intervention, temporary in time and space, blur the line between a social practice and a spatial practice, a social reality and a spatial practice. Later on, during my master thesis, I developed my keen interest on social life and public spaces. And thanks to this interest, later on, I had the chance to visit the offices of Design Trust for Public Space and Project for Public Spaces in New York City. Indeed, during my first year of PhD, I won a scholarship and I took a flight to New York, where I got, let's say, involved. I let myself be captivated by the plethora of different everyday uses in public spaces. And it's in New York where I decided to develop my PhD research on temporary and temporariness in urban theory and practice. After that experience, my doctoral project has evolved, and I investigated the contemporary shift in the North American street food vending phenomenon and street food vending industry, unpacking the social and spatial dimensions of this kind of temporary use. It is quite common in the United States, but not only in the United States. I was walking today into the city center of Dortmund, and I found food trucks into the main square. So it's quite common even in markets and in other cities all over the world. So I decided to study this peculiar topic, understanding how this kind of temporary use and more broadly temporary uses can shape and actually are shaping the public realm of contemporary cities. So as an academic, I let myself really, I got involved with temporary urbanism by chance for two actually trips. One in Venice during the Architectural Venice Biennale in 2012, and my trip to New York, where I had the chance to visit these two offices who are well engaged with placemaking and temporary uses in the city of New York.
Thanks so much for that, yeah, so we have now a broad range represented with not only the practitioner sense of what it means to be involved in temporary urbanism and temporary uses, but also a researcher sense. And I'm really happy to have this diversity represented tonight, and it will be interesting to try to refocus it, especially because we are trying to intersect two concepts, the notion of temporary urbanism, so kind of undefined and catalytic programs as well as actions in the urban field to help spur as well as give momentum or catalyze urban development. And then we have this other kind of conceptual creature of its own post-growth and the paradigm behind post-growth. So it will be very interesting for us to look at these intersections, and we'll cover this through two core kind of components in this next section here. Just a reminder, if you guys do have any questions, we will have an opportunity to answer them or collect them and then answer them after each of the sections. But what I get the honor to do right now is to start us off with this first component of the core discussions and look at general kind of interventions that are behind temperate urbanism and maybe how it links to post-growth. So one of the first things that we did when we set this event up was we, as a group with students as well as Christian and myself, we came up with ideas and we sent them out to all of our panelists here and gave them basically a heads up and said, we're covering temporary urbanism, and we have a few articles. Now, hopefully you guys can do a little bit of homework and try to relate. And there were no questions, so I was really impressed. But it also, I think, means that the experts that we have here definitely have an understanding of what it means to connect temporary urbanism with post-growth. And so the first question we have to kind of kick off this general discussion is simply that. How do the visions that each and every one of you have worked with in the specific forms and actions involved in temporary uses or temporary urbanism link to a post-growth future?
I can start. I just turned this on again. So for us it was really related into our design approach at first. So like we all did independent designs, but it was all related to like how we tackle urban planning challenges in the future. And they're all, I think, related to post-growth in some sense. Like we all came up with ideas like how to tackle mobility in the future, how to tackle like landscape planning, landscape architecture in urban settings in the future. And we came up with our designs that you saw before, like some small part of it. And we envisioned the city like in a more green way, in a more sustainable way, what post-growth is, what we were reading about. And then we asked ourselves, like, how can we start a discussion about this? And for us, it was like, for us in our like little project, like temporary use is like a vehicle to like show how public space can be in the future, like to interact more, to like grow more social capital, to talk about like our challenges of climate change and so on in the future. And we just go out, talk about it, like from like maybe like a student or scientific standpoint. And for me personally, like it was talking on last Friday with the Fridays for Future kids and scientists for future people about urban planning. And I think like us as urban planners, like we have solutions, like we talk about it every day. Like the next generation or our generation see a lot of problems and like the need for political change and transformation, how we like live and how we live more sustainable, and like post-growth or degrowth like is a framework in my opinion that like is the way to like tackle our challenges in the future, to like tackle the resources that we consume, especially in the Western world, like taking the car everywhere, flying out for holidays or like to other continents, yeah, this sort of stuff.
Great questions. So we have temporary use, conceive them as this notion of a vehicle. Anything to build off of that?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I'm not happy with the word degrowth or post-growth at all. So it's something that we have been discussing about before with your and my dear colleague Viola as well. So it's something that didn't cross my mind until recently, that there's the possibility that somebody doesn't want to grow. Actually, when we started back then in 2010 later on, we had always the notion in our heads to grow our ideas, to grow food, to grow plants, to grow into something, to grow our minds. And it's still hard for me to bring that debate that I understand in its details. It's surely applicable to a lot of things that we do as well. But talking about someone in, for example, I don't know, a neglected part of the city somewhere, to tell them, yeah, you are not able to grow. You shouldn't be growing, there shouldn't be growth, it's something, there's no growth anymore, so just deal with it. I mean, people have kids, they want to see their kids grow, they want to see their career grow, there are a lot of perspectives on where growth is still, and I think that's a good thing, positively connotated. That's one thing. But of course, I understand the implications that come with the concept. So there's a global perspective on how we use our natural resources, how we deal with the financial system. But in my eyes, there are other things that would act as a better name for the whole movement. So, but of course, I accepted it. I think it's already accepted overall. But still, there are some issues in communicating. When we talk about divisions in the local sphere, people want to see perspectives. They want to see something for their future that is good, and that they have a secure future and that is prosperous future. So you have to find the spots within the debate and within the criticism to the current economic system that gives that enables a link between their current local situation and the global situation, what they have to change. So, for example, I really like the ideas that you present in Dortmund, a city like the rest of the Ruhr area that has been neglected for a long time, that has ever had a very bad spatial appearance, and to give them an option of how using less carbon-based resources can also act as a positive image, something that will make their lives better. And I think our discussion about it should always be centered about what we all can achieve together and give each other to make things better. We don't necessarily have to call it growth, but there has to be some idea that is being given that is positive and that is future-oriented. I'm sure there are a lot of things that are positive in this concept as well.
Yeah. Well, we are actually part of the Brain Growth movement. Well, we never attend the meetings, but we are part of it. But we also hosted them in our latest project, so they had a kind of a little university there with lectures, and enjoyed the qualities of temporary use. It was very cool because we had no proper heating. But of course, if I think about, we think about temporary use and degrowth or post-growth discussion, where there are some certain issues which temporary use can address. So one thing is talking about existing buildings and their further use. So you have like spaces, and the most easy thing for an owner or an investor is to tear down and build something new. because it's the most easy to calculate. If you build it in an existing space, it's going to be more complicated. So, but temporary use can show in a certain time in which ways an existing building can be used. So, in a lot of cases, owners or even the city and even the neighbors lack ideas of in which way a building can be used besides the way it always was used. So, like, of course, we had this time of conversation of military barracks or industrial areas, which were an industrial area and became an industrial area later. So, but I think we are past with that, and now it's about thinking, well, it was an industrial building, but how can it be like a housing, or how can it be a place for small businesses and so on? And well, temporary use in many cases can prove that this place is really used, that there are ways of using it nobody mentioned before, and it's well a place of a way of experimenting on a quite a low scale level. So it's not so expensive. You have not to invest a lot of money there. And of course, with temporary use, you can host a lot of ideas and experiments. So in our latest project, Spatial, which was former nurses' home, and then that was a building for the administration, we, for example, had an initiative which was caring about public transport, and but the basic idea is that everybody in the city and around is paying for public transport if he's using it or not. So if you really ride public transport, you must pay that. But because everybody already paid for the public transport. So they got their first office in that space, and then had the opportunity to really work on a proper base of their concept. So right now, after 8 months, they're quite big on the topic, and well, luckily we had elections and winning, so this was one of the main topics as well in the voting, right? And they are now going to have new proper office spaces somewhere else.
I think that periods of rapid transitions like the one we are experiencing today make changes quite visible and observable and, let's say, explorable in the way they work. So the contemporary city transformation, let's say the mainstream account for temporary urbanism recognizes that there is an alternative able to reduce the burdens of regulations and lower the costs somehow. Going temporary was, especially in cities of highly developed countries, a way to producing and distributing goods and services at lower costs and with greater flexibility. With time, temporary urbanism has assumed a whole range of new meanings, new practices, new, it's also diversifying its forms. What makes, I think, strategic and central these issues, these tactics, these projects, these tools, these uses and practices, even though they mostly involve small scale and, let's say, small groups of individuals, is the way they enhance new forms of politics and social capital in the city. Sorry if I'm using very academic words. I know it's a completely different way of explaining that. In other words, I think temporary urbanism has emerged as a site for new claims for rights, place, and belonging, marking the urban landscape and the way we might use it. Not only we should use it, let's say. So based on my experience, I wrote some ideas. I think temporary urbanism might inform a post-growth future based on three main elements: change and dynamism, multiplicity, synergy, and negotiation, and I will explain later what I mean with these kind of concepts, and adaptability. Let's say temporary urbanism explores and expands different possibilities, And these forms change gradually the meanings and the perspective of the places. All the projects and the activities that these practitioners will show you somehow has changed gradually the meanings of and even the images of these kind of spaces. So towards a more sustainable development, or if we want to build a more sustainable, just and equal city, we need to use temporary urbanism or see temporary urbanism as a leveler. I would call it like this, as a leveler, as a way to break conventions, engaging the constant change that we are experiencing today. We cannot deny that we are always experiencing changes, fast changes. Multiplicity, synergy, and negotiation. I think that temporary urbanism sees the city as a platform, as a site where a multiple, let's say, a plethora again of activities and uses and practices overlap and exchange, but even though they overlap, the boundaries between these activities and spaces are blurred. Last but not least, I think adaptability is another concept that we need to keep in mind whenever we deal with a more sustainable, a more equal, a more just, a more, I would say, the future city, or the city of tomorrow. So I see temporary urbanism as an equalizer, another word, before it was a leveler, now it's an equalizer, a means to a more equal, just, and sustainable city. A way to progressively veer away from massive master planning or big investments, but instead a way to start growing the city side by side through pilot projects, through interval actions that might be better able to test and adjust the line towards this future and sustainable development.
Thanks for that. So before we move on to some of the more kind of global questions, we've mentioned various forms of what temporary urbanism, what temporary uses look like, everything from vehicles of change to processes of maybe not necessarily a critique of the post-growth paradigm, so growth being good, a process of growth in that sense, and also more experimental as well as more social justice in the sense of trying to pursue equity. How, in your opinion, in terms of the actual temporal patterns, so the reason why we look at temporary urbanism is that it contrasts the traditional way of planning, and that you have these long-term visions that set out and dictate certain patterns of policy and regulation as well as plans, and temporary urbanism kind of throws that all up in the air and says that we do things differently and spontaneously and ad hoc to some sense. In your experiences and opinions, to what extent do these temporal patterns matter? So is there regularity, or is there a duration or frequency, and what makes that the advantage of temporary use for processes of change, experimentation, or leveling?
Thinking about participation right now, kind of like what we are talking about in spatial planning a lot, like to include people that are living in the neighborhood into the planning process. And I think temporary use or temporary urbanism in this sense can be a vehicle again to include people in the planning process more, not just to let them participate in the process, but to let them be the process, to let them figure out the public space, the street is not just a street for traffic, but it's a public space again, where you can interact, where you can go, what you can create yourself, and you spend way more time there. This is my short answer maybe to this question.
Well, in my opinion, of course, temporary uses or temporary inventions can be like something also partial neighborhoods. So, or maybe about the neighborhoods where people care more about too much traffic and then engage themselves in doing something like street markets or what kind of initiatives to avoid more traffic on their streets and things like this. But even though it's always, I think, an approach which can be copied if it's successful to other neighborhoods. So I think that's very important if we're talking about like influence or regularity. It has to be something which can be adopted into everywhere in the city, and where people in some way can be addressed to participate of that. I mean, people maybe have more working problems in their living than caring about traffic or caring about where the food was corrupt. But for that reason, I think it's still important to have all those examples that you really can kind of transfer everywhere. The same about regulations, which is something we have to tackle quite often in recent times, because with this concept of temporary uses, they're getting more used to people. Projects grow, and it's something which has been like small enough to beneath more or less public, attention or. Yeah, maybe attention is maybe allowed on a base, or it's well, it's not regulated because it's not mentioned too much, and meanwhile we are on a level where people always listen or are infected by those different projects. So of course we're talking about regulations in the city of Bremen, and at that point we are right now getting into the normal process, which needs a lot of regulations, and we have to find some solution how to change those regulations more or less, and to make it open for this small actions of temporary urbanism. And actually, this will be part of the new government. At least they suggested to keep it in their program, and I think how they can make temporary uses easier.
It's about legacy. So I think temporary uses, well, what I like about them most is I think that you can do things that don't cost anything in the first place. So a lot of let's say vacancies in the cities that could act as a resource. So a lot of byproducts and waste products of the city can be used again, maybe experimentally or as a temporary use, to give them a new meaning and to give them new uses for the future. I think, for example, if you have a vacant urban area, you can, I mean, in Dortmund, if you want to sit outside a bar or something, it's really hard. There are only a few bars actually allowed. When you come to, I don't know, Italy, it's completely different. It's partly because of the weather, but it's also because, there's a very simplistic notion that when you want to use the public space, you have to earn money with it, you have to pay for it. But nobody does it. Almost no bar actually pays for it and doesn't use it. So there's nothing on the streets. So the city could say, yeah, let's just do it for free, give the space away for free, and the public space will be qualified. So things like that, or you have materialistic waste of some sort that you can still use, but you have to destroy it. For example, using food that comes out of shops and it's not used anymore or something. I think those things act as an option for better, for better use of the resources, and temporary uses, for example, temporary uses of buildings. It's the same. It's just a resource of the city that is neglected and vacant, and there's a whole regime that prohibits these buildings and resources from actually taking part in it. And I think it's very important that there are some experimental uses that make it visible again that these resources exist, and how you can tackle them, because it's it's very hard to actually do it. I mean, you have to act as a mediator for this, because it's a very complicated system of laws and regulations that actually prohibits people from using it. And I think there should be, in every city, in every part of the city, there should be more initiatives and people that act as a good example for how you can do it, so other people feel invited to actually do it as well. And it may not have a big impact on the XL large scale when you reuse an empty building in one part of the city, but it can multiply with the people that actually come by and use it and see that something is happening. It can multiply in the part of the city and beyond that. By now, I mean, this discussion, this discourse, the people working in this field, you can come to almost every German city, European city, and you will always find some or another initiative that does things like this, and it is multiplying. I think it's growing, and that is one of the most important legacies, that you don't need to have the big picture in mind all the time. You just need to work on making people, giving people the self-effectiveness of doing it for themselves. I think that's the most important legacy of temporary urbanism.
All right. So, temporal legacy. I think the big fault of contemporary planning disciplines has been the overdetermination of both the city's visual form and its social functions. Indeed, something went wrong in the theoretical and practical perception of what a city should have been. In my opinion today, what is still missing is a broader sense of time. Seeing the city as a process, as an open system where temporary urbanism might provide opportunities for democratic engagement. So I think that we can identify two, at least in my personal experience with temporary urbanism from a theoretical and practical point of view during my academic studies, we can identify two different groups of patterns, what you call patterns. The first one is the physical features of the phenomenon, and the other one is the social features of the phenomenon. From the physical features, I see concepts such as, and I write them down just to give you the list, appropriation, so creating places out of spaces, so the appropriation of a space, creating a place. Provision, as I said before, producing and distributing goods and services or activities that are highly requested in that areas. Then we have mobility. At least in my case, in mobile food vending, street food vending, mobility is one of the main one of the main feature of this phenomenon. Then we have proximity, so the close relations to other existing spaces and activities. And I think all your projects somehow try to create proximity and relationship with the other existing activities and services. And then we have negotiation and looseness. When looseness means a narrative indeterminacy, somehow a porosity into the built environment. And this is another thing I feel is quite important as a physical feature of temporary urbanism. Should be light, let's say. From the social point of view, I think continuity, so the regularity and the familiarity of activities and uses and practices is so important in temporary urbanism approaches. And then we have visibility, so the importance of the human scale and somehow visual identity that is what attracts people to that temporary use or to that temporary practice or to that temporary space. And then we have frequency and predictability. So people need to know that temporary use is there. So it should be able to create a sense of place, and the sense of place can be created only through a regularity and through the frequency of the use of the practice and of the activity. So all these concepts, in my opinion, represent the arsenal of tools that as planners, as urbanists, as architects, as practitioners, we have, and we are asked to use them very creatively, even today. If we are thinking about a sustainable city, so more democratic, equal, and again, sustainable development in the near future, we should layer the urban space and the city with these multiple registers that temporary urbanism is offering us, that are, I think, the ones, or at least these ones I try to explain really briefly, are the ones, in my opinion, could be used today in order to try to create a more democratic environment, a more equal city, and a more sustainable development within the near future.
Okay, thanks for that. And now we see that there's quite a large variety of thoughts from the very basic, very general ones up to democratic decision making towards very specific actions and interventions. And from my perception, post-growth thinking is very much connected to, on the first side, to acting, of doing something now, of changing things, and urbanism is part of that. And on the second part, the debate is connected with there are limits to what we can do. There are limits on the global scale, climate, social issues, ethical issues towards other people, also ethical issues towards future generations. And there are also responsibilities of people acting today, acting right now, acting here towards other places, other spaces. So there's more than the individual action. So I think there's both this discourse, the individual action, to change and global responsibility towards global challenges put forward by sustainability, the sustainability agenda, Dortmund report Rio 1992, and further beyond the sustainability issues. That's still part of this global issue. You are part of globally responsible actions. So I would like to get some of your comments on how your very specific actions here on the ground in Dortmund, Bremen, in other cities relate to global issues, to your global responsibilities towards change.
Yeah, I just want to come back to what Jan said before about post-growth, degrowth, or however you want to call it. I think it's what you were talking about, like we are always talking about like restrictions and do we grow less, and I think you're right, maybe we should like use a different term to like talk about climate change, and we can't use a car anymore, we shouldn't fly anymore, we should eat less meat or no meat. And I think like it's about embracing like a different form of living and don't see it as restrictions, but see it as like just something else. Just like, and this is what we want to show, to come here to your question with our project, is to show like the discussion is always about like, can we like kill this parking lot? Can we like do one train, like one lane on the ring in Dortmund that we convert to a bike path, but then we have one lane less for cars to use? This is something less, and like we restrict ourselves. And we want to show that you have something more and change the discussion. Like you can go out and, for example, at home at my parents' place, I can go into the garden right in front of my house. This is maybe what you were talking about, proximity. Like in our single-family house, we can like plant our garden, like use our garden and greenery. Here in the city, like it's all sealed and all cars, and we're using the space for this. And in another concept, like we can have more of this, more greenery in the city. We can have space where we can sit, where we can interact, where we can talk about all sorts of stuff, whatever we want. and we can come together in the city more. And I think like we should talk about more about like what we can create more for, in our sense, public space, and not what we have less. And we should, like in this concept of post-growth, climate change, and whatever, we should talk more about like the chances that we can like provide, talking about topics like this.
So, yeah, you're right, I see it in the same ways. Actually, when I was criticizing the term growth, it's not that I criticize it for being negative in its connotation, but it doesn't call the problem by its name. The problem is decarbonization, so it's about burning less fuel. We have too much CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's because we burned dinosaurs since 200 years, that's why. Yeah. And nobody actually talks about that. I wonder why it's not a topic, so everybody just talks about let's drive less because it's a bit, it's better if you let your car stay home, but it's a modal split, so some people can still use the car, but you have to use the bike. So it's something that, in my opinion, doesn't work because most of these actions that are being undertaken give rise to problems that hit the poorest the hardest. So that if you have if you are a mother, single,
my mom and our single family house.
You're a mother and you want to move your child from the kindergarten somewhere because you also have to do your job and everything is a bit complicated and there's a lot of time pressure and so on. You want to rely on your car. You don't want to ask this specific person to, you should maybe stop. So and there's so much fuel burned by other things. So it's not. Regulation in this sense is not effective. What we should be doing is stopping drilling for oil and burning it in cars and making a lot of useless plastic from it. So making plastic from it is actually still a good thing, but we're putting it in the ocean. So there are a lot of problems that arise from this specific activity that humans do, and it's something that should be stopped. So, in my opinion, global debate should circle around this fact. So, in the local sphere, there are a lot of things that still consume energy and still consume fossil fuels, and I think it will go on for a while. But you need to show the people what the alternatives are. So, how can we reorganize things? And of course, since our whole urbanization has been relying on carbon fuels, and we need to change a lot of things to actually still make it happen. And I can understand that a lot of people are overwhelmed by the implication that this takes. So I think we need, on the large scale, to actually make things happen and start moving things to find regulations that may be hard. And then we can search for new options on the local scale. I'm pretty sure that new options for making life a good thing will pop up once it's regulated. There's so many examples for how people thought they couldn't live anymore if something gets regulated, but it still works out. Another thing is, for example, pretty everyday feature, how do we want to change. How do we want to decarbonate the society? But the trains in Germany are not working, so why is that happening? I know there's a really large discrepancy between what is wanted on a large scale, the Kyoto Protocol and so on, and what's actually happening. It's not happening, so the politics is they're not doing their job in the right way, and the problem is put on the heads and on the lives of just regular people that suffer from this, or may suffer. And I'm also not a big fan of people that start, I fly a lot, but I have to fly because I have to disseminate my ideas about not flying anymore, things like that, which is happening a lot. And we are so biased, and so there's so many ambivalences in that I think that on a local level, other things should matter, and for the real problems, we need global regulation. that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, I totally agree on that, on both statements. I mean, you have to matter, what you really have to address is like quality of life, how quality of life in cities can rise with those methods of projects. How you can have more green space, like you mentioned, how we can have transport which is not relying on cars, and all those things which might make life in cities more smart. I mean, we have this big discussion about affordable housing, and I think you know as well as every other German city. But if you look at the numbers of people living in Bremen, you will recognize it's the same number of people like living there 40 or 50 years ago. So the number of people has not risen, but the growth of the flats also where the people live. So that's very much based on growth, not only of economy, but as well on growth of our personal belongings and things. I mean, it's the same with the number of cars, and maybe it's the same with the number of flat screens and all the other stuff. So, but it's very difficult to have a debate on how much space people are allowed to live. I mean, nobody will talk anybody to live only on 20 square meters per head. I mean, you can start it, but the day you start it, you will have no chance to be voted again.
Do you think there should be a maximum limit?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are doing this on wards in different areas of the city, and I mentioned it a lot of times, how this changed over the years. I mean, it was not a discussion, but in this year, I think this last year was the first time I read it in a newspaper where some people were mentioning, okay, of course we have a lack of affordable housing because we all live in so much square meters. And as well, we have a lot of commuters. I mean, 50% of the people living working in Bremen live outside of the city at least. So people are coming from Hamburg to live to work in Bremen. People from Bremen go by train to Hamburg. It's good, trains going. But so that in some way, people 50 years ago would say it's totally crazy, but today that's quite pretty normal. I mean, so what about that really of something which is counting on, well, it's not only on quality of life, but about what is important to me, what is kind of a life-work balance, how much time do I spend in my job, how much is it worth for me to have a proper job, and for me and my partner, which is maybe not getting a job in the same city as me, and so on. So that's really very big issues which can only be partly addressed by those projects, especially by those projects we are doing. But it's always like small steps which have to be made to start at least.
I might add another very short question. Like usually, post-growth is in many instances related to how we use land and property, and you show a different example that goes temporary in a different way how we use land. How does this contribute to maybe changing this problem of ever-growing use of space without providing more quality of life?
Well, I don't know how to get it, but but we have this discussion about this building where we are right now, or one of the projects we have right now, and it's sure everybody knew from the beginning it will be teared down. So not in 2 weeks, not next week, they will stop like gas and electricity, and in 2 weeks maybe is the caterpillar will come and tear it down. So, yeah. The bulldozer, whatever. Yeah. And, but this is really changing in some way the way people see this building. I mean, especially if visitors come, we had this exhibition last week and some were coming in and maybe some, they had been very nice, but some were like doing, or handling the building like, oh well, it's cut down next week anyway, so why should we behave here? And it's a little bit the same as the users in the beginning. And they are thinking about, okay, we can do whatever we want because it will be teared down. But that's not the way you should use a building, because as long as you are in it, it's still the place where you're working, where you're living, where you meet people, and that's pretty important. And you get a connection to this building anyway if you work there. So I mean, this was one of the most shitty places where we ever had our office. So it was, for us, it was quite depressing because it was so dark and smelly. But still, it's not about wasting this time or wasting this building. It has to be, it has to be used the way it is, and you have to really care about that. And I think that's kind of a mind construction as well.
If I may interrupt at this point, I think there's some really interesting tensions that are being linked between the local and global kind of demands, and also the relationship between people as well as space and buildings. And Sarah, could you maybe add a piece to that, because you bring in this notion of mobility through your work with food trucks, and maybe how even this global trend of trendsetting food trucks is perhaps adding a different dimension to this.
So I think that temporary urbanism, or at least I speak about temporary urbanism, not about, let's say, food trucks or street food vending in the American context, because I want to frame it more broadly, but has emerged as an attempt to take urban matters such as inequalities or injustice or highly regulated environments into the own hands of the urban of the temporary actors that were taking part to this movement. I think that in the case of mobility and in the case of temporary urbanism in the United States, the actors shown how they can empower people more with respect to, let's say, global challenges, or somehow they were able to develop, to push and to develop a more equitable, and they were able to unlock the potential of different sides. And I think this can be linked to the global challenges we are facing today, because if we think that in 2008, probably a lot of you know this issue, for the first time in history, the world population achieved, more than half of the world population was living in cities. And in 10 years, so like tomorrow, 2/3 of the world population will live in cities. So we need to empower people. We need to be able to empower the civil society. And I see temporary urbanism in this sense, and at least the case of San Francisco or the case of street food vending that I will explain tomorrow. But it's really interesting in this way of empowering people, a way to how to mobilize to mobilize people, not only activities, but even their ideas, their energies towards sustainable development. And I see that, I heard a lot of things, so I'm trying to reconceptualize my answer, but I think that if we want to approach a more sustainable city, we must engage with both big forces, so the market and, let's say, global challenges, and the civil society, because we can't pursue a more sustainable city without empowering the civil society. And this is how temporary urbanism might be connected, I think, to global challenges and to global responsibility to empower people easily with respect to the planning, the traditional planning practice.
I just wanted to add something. I was sorry for just interrupting your time plan all the time, and so I just wanted to add something positive maybe. I think I see it the same way. So there's a lot of empowerment going on, and like I said, even if it doesn't have an impact on the large scale at once, it starts movements and it starts new thinking processes in the heads of the people that are taking part of it. So I think there should be more action that actually acts as a role model for the people that have to change in the future. So there has to come the change. So we know that already that things are going down quite fast, and we have to act. And the sooner the people learn how to deal with this frugality, the better it is. And I think it's a good thing that people understand how things work, but there's still a lot of work to be done, I think, to participate people that don't take part in this kind of discussion and rather academic discussion about how things should be done, that just act as they feel and don't have a view for the big picture. And I think, and I still have to renew that claim that there has to be regulation for a lot of things. So, for example, for the supermarkets, we couldn't sell plastic bags anymore. There was just a very small intervention by law, but I think it was pretty effective. And a lot of those small things can still be done, and to make it a slow process that people get used to this new kind of frugality, and I think that temporary urbanism and the people involved can act as idols and role models for this kind of process. Just wanted to